The following podcast is proudly brought to you by Vite Ramen. Use the link in the description and use offer code BROKENSILICON to get 10% off tasty, healthy, and easy-to-make ramen. And also use the offer code BROKENSILICON to get 25% off Windows keys and die shrink to get 3% off everything else on the website at cdkeyoffer.com. Now, on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and I'm joined today, as I am on every news episode, by my co-host,
Dan.
Oh, yeah. How are you doing, Dan?
Oh, I'm pretty good, I suppose. In the full swing of the semester now, so things are getting progressively more and more busy, but...
Yeah. I mean, I guess... So where are we? So wait. Where are we? We're on Earth. And it is February. I was honestly thinking, so, yeah, I guess you're out of the honeymoon period. January, especially the first, half, is usually pretty easy on everyone, both at work and in the academic settings. But now this is when the rubber hits the road again.
Yeah, and, now in addition to lab stuff, I need to keep track of class stuff, so that's fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got to be honest. It's been, for my part of Moore's Law, is that it's been a stressful week. I mean, I've had a million fires to put out just in kind of personal things, including Reesie getting hurt because someone decided to leave a broken Starbucks Frappuccino bottle by the side of a sidewalk. And of course, we go running at night half the time, especially because night starts at 5 p.m. So it's almost impossible to not go running at night unless you go running before work's over. And I had to bandage her up, bring her to the vet multiple times to do checkups. I know people saw that on Twitter and the outpouring of support. I showed it to me and Mary Kate, my girlfriend, were looking at it on Twitter, and the amount of people that just sent us pictures of when their dog hurt their foot I did not expect that. I expected a lot of good wishes, but I did not expect people to show us, don't worry, my dog healed from the same thing. And so it made us feel like we were all in it together, guys. I do appreciate the outpouring of support, but rest assured, Reese's fine. And in fact, she's playing up how much she's hurt. Clearly,
yeah,
as I've seen
that.
When I'm not around, I've seen her running like it's nothing. But when she's around me, she hops on 3 legs like she's injured. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, dogs are dumb.
Yeah, but she is adorable, so we can't help but give her extra treats right now. Anyways, even if we know half of it's an act. I don't know. I mean, otherwise, half of this...
In more dog news, my dog just turned 5, so there's also that. So...
Did you do anything special for Wendy?
No, I gave her some extra treats. I don't celebrate dog birthdays too much, but since we're on the topic of dogs, I thought I might as well bring it up.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of other reasons why it's been stressful, it's just, as we're recording this is technically the evening after I put out that kind of whistleblower leak again, but this time for AMD, talking about how AMD pays AIBs to have half of their day one stock be at MSRP, which again is we'll get into it more, is a far better situation than Nvidia paying for 10 of them to be at MSRP, but it's still dishonest and disingenuous, and it's I thought about that, and then it's so I've also covered ARC being delayed to Q2, the 3090 Ti possibly basically never being real, and how many other things being delayed. It's been a very negative start to the year, I feel like, Dan, and I just want everyone to know that it wears on me too.
I mean, yeah, in general, it's just been nothing great has really happened since in PC gaming since 2022 started. I mean, or not PC gaming, I should just say gaming in general. You have 2 massive acquisitions, which I don't think are great for the industry. You have all of the crap with every launch seemingly. Either being delayed or poorly received.
You said nothing great's happened so far. It's like, 3050, just a flat out lie about that. Everything about that card was a lie up until now, which we'll get into later as well. And then like the 6500 XT wasn't as much of a lie, but still some lies. And it's like your comment, Dan, that nothing great has launched. It's like, the best you can say, arguably mediocre about the 6500 XT, which is probably the highest praise I could come up with. And even then, I'd almost feel like that's going easy on it.
Yeah, it's just been I guess, what is it, 5-6 weeks now? It hasn't been the best 6 weeks as far as gaming goes, but hopefully it'll get better over time.
Yeah. Well, and the good news is, though, I would point out, availability is clearly getting better. Pricing for CPUs is getting better. RAM, most things are getting better. And you are seeing GPUs pricing start to go down. So all I'm going to say is I remember last year going, I feel like by late Q2, things will start to get better, but they won't be mostly better until the end of the year. And I think we're seeing it. It's not an obvious yet, but things are clearly getting a little better. You're seeing a lot of scalpers drop their prices on eBay across the board right now. Not all the way, but it's getting cheaper.
Yeah, and I think the CPU situation has pretty much always been less dire than the GPU one. But so I'm just hoping to see the GPU issues get somewhat better than they are right now. Because CPU, I honestly think for the most part, it's just not nearly as bad as the GPUs.
Yeah, and I guess before we get into our first stories, I didn't really feel the need to put any of the corrections in or any goofy reader mails to open. Nothing really spoke to me, to open with here. I would say, are you able to get food again, Dan? Because I remember a couple weeks ago, you sent me pictures of your grocery store, and it was way worse than other ones I've seen in my area. Like, just literally empty aisles of food.
I can start to get food again now, which is nice. I mean, I remember going to the grocery store, and they just didn't have, any meat or produce out really at all. And it's getting better, There's still some limitations, thankfully. Thankfully, it's getting better. There's still some limitations because the only meat I was able to buy at the grocery store was, I'm pretty sure, knockoff salmon.
That is the only meat when you were there, and you're in rural Massachusetts, for the record.
And some John Bill sausage, I think. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and when I say knockoff, it's called, it has a color. What salmon looks like. It's like some weird dye-looking, almost red color that I saw in the salmon. So I was like, I'm pretty sure this isn't actual salmon, but and my taste buds confirmed that because It did not taste like salmon either.
Better than imitation crab meat or worse? Because I'd say imitation crab meat tastes really good for the first 2 bites, and then I just get tired of it immediately.
I don't know. It was just kind of not good, so I don't really know what the fish was.
Sounds worse than imitation crab meat comparatively than imitation salmon. Well, I mean, I do have to bring it up. I don't think you have it yet, but based on the tracking information I looked at, you should have it arrive tomorrow. I did tell our sponsor, my contact, who is actually the CEO of Vite Ramen, no, Dan can't even, literally his grocery store is empty of food right now. Could he have some? And they're like, yeah. And as far as I can tell, they've sent you a huge package. So I guess if they're willing to feed you when you can't get food, they do get at least an extra plug for keeping Dan alive.
Thank you to Tim.
Thank you to Tim at Vite Ramen. Again, links in the description if you want to, make sure you use our links to get it for a good price. But if you want to support them, they support us. And speaking of stretching things to the limits, let us talk about a product that stretches mobile PC gaming to the limit with story number one. Story number one, Steam Deck receives its early reviews. Now, I have a small write-up here. This is my perspective before we get to yours, I suppose. Valve's Steam Deck is almost out, and fortunately, we have some early reviews. At this stage, Moore's Law is Dead would summarize, or at least I, Tom of Moore's Law is Dead, would summarize the situation as such. For the Steam Deck, the input controls seem very highly praised. There's a lot to choose from in terms of what input you can use for aiming and like a shooter, and they all feel great. The boost clocks of the graphics card in the Van Gogh-based APU seemingly do not drop notably below their top speeds quoted so far, much like the PS5, alleviating concerns that it was more of a 1 teraflop console than a 1.5 teraflop console. And performance is about what you should have expected. It runs low resolutions, almost at 60 hertz generally speaking. And if that's impressive, will be in the eyes of the beholder. Tom, personally, I'm not excited about a new product struggling to run 2-year-old games at 60 hertz, but if you compare it to other handheld Windows devices, it pretty much crushes them. Also, battery life is, again, similar to the last thing I brought up, impressive compared to most of the competition, but it's still only just over 3 hours. Oh, and the speakers, though, sound excellent. So overall, this thing is in a league of its own. It costs half as much as competing Windows handheld devices, while generally offering far superior performance. But if that's enough for high volume of sales, if the game reliability is going to be good outside of the Valve's initial cherry-picked games for reviewers to discuss, is yet to be seen. So that's kind of my write-up, my take on the Steam Deck. I know you read some reviews or watched some. Let's just start here. How would you summarize the Steam Deck at this point?
To me, it seems like a thing that can run games on low and 800p, like depending on the class of game it's in, at 30 to 60 FPS. I don't think that's really a surprise to anyone. Like, that seems right in line with all of the performance we expected. It's almost hard to compare this device to other things just because, it's pretty unique. I think other handhelds have tended to be a bit overpriced. This may or may not be, because it doesn't have much storage, but, it's kind of offering almost a new level of portability. But that's the issue with it. It's like it's almost a new level of portability, and I think that's kind of the problem with the Steam Deck from my eyes so far, is that I think it's almost its own thing, but it's just a little bit too big or a little bit underpowered for what it is. And so I would like to see if it could have made it more compact, so you could truly fit it in your pocket. It would have sold. I think it would have been a lot better, or if it were slightly more powerful. But as it stands, it's a Switch-ish device that can play most PC games.
The way I think about the Steam Deck is this. Are we comparing it to laptops? Or are we comparing it to other portable Windows devices? Because I understand that if you just compare it to other portable Windows devices, it looks crazy good because the other portable Windows devices cost more and are weaker. Okay. But also, isn't this substantially bigger than most of those other portable Windows gaming devices?
Yeah.
And if it isn't, it still has a lower resolution screen, which some people would go, well, yeah, but, it doesn't need a high resolution, to which I would say, yes, probably, but at the same time, I mean, the other ones, if you're only going to play indie games, I bet you actually could run the high resolution that those screens come with. And if you're comparing it to a laptop, for the price, there's plenty of $600 laptops that, I think Asus literally has an MX450 6-core Zen 3 laptop you can get. So that is way stronger than this, and is that way stronger? Let me think. Actually, it's probably similar performance while having a bigger screen, and then you go, well, that's a laptop. And I go, yeah, but is this fitting in anything that you can't bring a laptop in? This is not in your pocket. This is going in a backpack anyways. It's hard for me to say.
Yeah. To me, it seems like a device that's primarily meant for a person that spends a decent amount of time commuting using public transportation. Like, I guess maybe there's another use case beyond it that I'm not thinking of, but that's kind of what I see it for. And, you can say there's a lot of people in this country that fit that description. Like, it doesn't fit either of us, but, what is it? A significant proportion of people in the U.S., it alone, live in a major city. A lot of people in Europe rely on public transportation more so than most people in the United States. So, maybe there is a market there that I'm not thinking of, but it does seem relatively niche to me. And if that's what it's competing with, I think a lot of people would choose a Switch over this. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think I would.
Yeah, I think we'll need to wait for more reviews and a couple months to pass before I would definitively say on that one. I would say, actually, I would lean towards getting this over the Switch quite easily because it can already play my Steam library of games. But then I have to put an asterisk and go, I think. Right now, we have early reviews where they're mostly looking at games that Valve says, look at this one. Mm-hmm. I want to see how many games actually work easily on this. You know, like, are there any big ones that we play that just won't work well? And so, and you know, like, I'd like to see someone try to do things like play Age of Empires 4 on it. It'd probably be a disaster, but I don't know. You know, maybe the inputs on there and everything can make it work okay. I doubt it, but I'd like to see, because that's what it all comes down to. You know, if it actually turns out that it does work with every game well, then it's, you know, pretty decent. But otherwise, for me, it's like, I would just feel like I have to go for the expensive version. I think it's like $630 or something that has the anti-glare screen and half a terabyte of storage. I would lean towards just getting the full one there. Mm-hmm. You know, or at least, I don't know, though, because the SD card thing seems to work well. I'm not exactly sure, but if I'm already spending above $500, then I'd rather just spend an extra few $100s to get like a 3060 laptop or something, than get this, because whatever I have as my portable device, I want to be able to work on it. I'm not going to carry two things around with me on vacation. If I have or another way to put it, I need the laptop with me when I'm traveling anyways. If I have the laptop with me, guys, my laptop has a fold open, it's super thin, it fits in small backpacks, and it has a 15.6-inch 4K OLED screen. I plug in a controller, a full controller, and I can just play Battlefield or Age of Empires if I have a mouse. This is a whole other, I'm literally bringing desktop gaming with me on the go, whereas it remains to be seen how many compromises are on this thing. If I have to bring the laptop with me anyways, why would I not just use that?
Once again, I think the big question mark, like, that none of the reviewers could talk about yet because their software isn't finished, is just how many games it can play, or how many games it can play without issue. And I guess once that we like definitively know that, I think you can start drawing stronger conclusions on the Steam Deck, because as it stands right now, the reviews didn't change my opinion of it much one way or the other. Aside from, I guess we can come off as overly negative towards it, because I do think it's overall,
it seems to be a high quality piece of tech. I agree.
Yeah, it seems to be a high quality piece of tech that, from everything, all of the people that were given access to it said good things about it objectively. So I think, like, the main gripe we have, not gripe even, the main thing we have with the Steam Deck is that it might serve a more niche or smaller market than a lot of the popular discussion of it says. Like, it just might not really serve that many people or be useful to that many people. To the people that it's useful for, you're getting a high quality item, but it's just, I don't see the reason to buy it over a laptop in a lot of situations, unless if it has really good access to, like, the Steam library of games. Some people will definitely want it, and I think it'll probably get good reviews. If that games list is relatively limited, I think there's almost no reason to get it for most people, though.
Yeah, and I guess I do want to say that, because I do think, I haven't seen many people, almost anyone, complain about it, but I would understand if some people thought we were too critical of the Steam Deck. But I think we just need to be honest about why we might be extra critical, and that's that it depends on what stage of your life you're in. You know, I'm not in the stage of my life where people, like where I was a teenager or younger, where oftentimes people were driving me around, or I had to ride the bus, or I was on airplanes a lot flying back from college or eventually I just drove because I went to Michigan Tech, and trying to fly out of there in the winter was a nightmare. But, you know, there was still, you know, going on family vacations, having hours to kill where you're not needed. I'm needed if I'm traveling now. I'm essential to the train moving forward at this point, at this stage of my life. And also, as I've gotten older, I have less free time. And so that free time to me is only worth spending on a leisure activity that maximizes the fun of it, right? Like, you know, me and you had PlayStation Vitas, and that was great. But at this point, it's like, I don't want a low-resolution compromised controller. I want to plug in a full Xbox PS5 controller or just pull out a mouse and use the keyboard on the laptop with a 4K screen. I'll pay extra to just have the full desktop experience, or what I think is close enough, which I have a 2060 of a 1650 GDDR6. Yours is strong enough to play basically every game at 1080p high 60. Mine is good enough to play everything at about 1440p 60 high. That to me, close enough that I have the full experience on the go. And I understand I can't hold that easily while I'm on an airplane necessarily or whatever. But it's like, yeah, but I'm not going to bother to game unless I'm getting the full experience anyways.
Yeah, and I think the library of games you have access to, even if the software for they're using is fine.
Proton and such.
Proton, yeah. I think you're inherently limited to what you can play, because I don't think this is going to be playing AAA games, or I don't think this is going to be playing many AAA games from this year, even if you're willing to compromise frame rate to like below 30 FPS on average.
Which I'm not. I don't want to play it then.
Yeah, so I just think you're kind of limited to stuff, to indie games and things that some AAA games that were made recently, and AAA games and then older AAA games is what I think you're kind of limited to on this device, which that might be fine. That might be good enough for some people, like, I'm just traveling for a weekend or something, and I like to play an indie game or whatever for 30 minutes a day. It would be fine, but I just don't think this is a device to play new games on at all.
Which, again, for me, it's like I'm always going to have my laptop with me in case I have to do an emergency podcast or a video on the go, in case I need to type something up, respond with a work email. I'm always going to have the laptop with me. So for me, a portable device needs to be so portable that its ease of use while moving justifies having a second device, and its size is easy enough to throw in without feeling like I'm carrying two laptops. That is a valid point, and I stand by it. But again, I emphasize that is my perspective in the stage of my life I'm in and how I live my life. And so if you're someone that wanted a portable gaming device, I don't think you really do beat this for the performance and price compared to the Switch or the other Windows devices. And the fact that you can get that SD cards are now as fast as about SATA SSDs, and you can get one of those for a reasonable price and pop it in to get an extra terabyte of storage. I do think that the worry that this wasn't good for the people that want a device like this is gone, because it seems high quality. And so don't take my apprehension as meaning that you should be. If this is something you've been dreaming about and you're sure you would use it, like you're someone that games on a Switch all the time and games on a Switch without using the kickstand and using it basically like a laptop anyways, then you'll probably love this device. And I think I could see why this would be really successful. And again, I hope it is, because I want this to grow. I want more competition. And I especially want Linux to emerge as a viable gaming operating system, so Microsoft, again, has competition.
Yeah, Switch is always better.
Cade writes in, Tom, this is more of a die shrink question, but do you think that Valve is making any money on the Steam Deck? Well, I think it is conductive to the conversation here today, Gade. He says, given its larger size when compared to another handheld such as the Switch, not to mention the fact that its APU is actually based on a modern node. Yeah, I think the Switch is like based on 20 nanometer or something. He says, the shipping and raw materials cost of the Steam Deck make me struggle to believe Valve is making much money, if any at all, on the Steam Deck at $400 base model. Is Valve simply expecting to recoup the money they may lose on each unit with digital game sales in a similar fashion to Microsoft and Sony? Is it possible that because the Van Gogh APU was originally designed for another purpose, as you've alluded to in the past, that Valve was able to get a comparatively good price on the APUs to help them better reach their desired price point? So, two things. Number one, I actually wouldn't underestimate that a calculation for having low margins on this device might be that this makes you want to buy Steam games. I think I need to emphasize that. It's not just about that they will get digital sales on this device. It's that, and I've seen a lot of people say this, and I even say it. The fact that if I have to play a game on Game Pass, I can't play it easily on the Steam Deck. But if I pay the money on Steam, that means I own it on Steam, can use Steam software, and if I ever get a Steam Deck, I can use it. That's a real calculation that they're thinking of, not just to make the money on the Steam Deck's software sales, but to make people want to keep buying games on Steam for other uses. So I think that is a reason they would accept lower margins. Having said that, I don't think it would be hard to profit at $400. I just don't think it's a huge profit margin. And I think people underestimate the absurd margins on that fucking Switch. That Switch has such ridiculous margins, guys. It's insane. But people keep buying it, so why would they lower the price?
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if the $400 one was somewhat low margin, but then you have to look at the $650 one, which there's some bells and whistles added onto it, and then it has the 512 gigabyte SSD. I bet that doesn't really cost that much more for them to make, and they're charging $250 more for it. But maybe it costs $100 more for them to make, but that's still a lot more money for them.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt that there's something always there where when they have the cheaper model, have the smaller storage, that's that small, it's to make the higher storage model look like a good value, even though it doesn't cost them probably more than $30 more to put that in there.
Yeah, because I just wanted to check prices just because I don't even remember anymore. But yeah, you can get 512 gigabyte SSDs, NVMe SSDs now for less than $80, and this is, I'm sure, a bulk purchase deal. I don't think they're just going onto Newegg and buying NVMe drives.
No, I do not think so. But yeah, so what else what else can I say about that? It's just, there's definitely a calculus there, I think, that they're willing to accept lower margins to get into this market, to give Steam games you buy more value across multiple devices and for those digital sales they're getting. But at the same time, I think they're making money on it, actually. I mean, look, it's priced about what a cheap laptop is. This has a cheap, tiny APU and a small battery and a cheap screen. I know it's nicer than some other screens, but it is a very cheap screen, guys. So, no, I actually think that the thing that costs them the most is just the build quality of the chassis.
Yeah, definitely. And I do just have to say, I think this is a different calculation than the Switch, the PS, or Switch is profiting, but they could have sell that at a loss, like a similar business model that Sony and Xbox do, because all of their sales are internal pretty much. But it's a little different of a calculus than like the PS5 or Xbox, where their consoles are oftentimes a loss leader, because there's less that they directly make off of the Steam Deck, I think. I mean, there's less that they indirectly make off the Steam Deck, I think, by making you buy into a platform like you are with the Xbox or PlayStation.
This piece of content is brought to you by Vite Ramen. For 2022, give yourself the gift of an easy-to-make-at-home meal that's healthy, reasonably priced, and above all else, actually tasty, so that you actually do eat a healthy meal. I eat it all the time, and it really tastes fantastic. It's so easy to either eat a packet by itself as a lunch, or you can put a couple of eggs in there while it's boiling, and well, you can then have a hearty meal at the end of the day. Click the link in the description and use the offer code BrokenSilicon to save 10% off a special bundle just for Moore's Law Z fans that includes spoon, chopsticks, and more. This is a great deal for you, and it really does help the channel tremendously. Seriously, I eat it. It's good. They've been supporting Moore's Law Z for months, and you buying their product supports me. And you know what? You really should try to if you want a healthy and tasty snack to start out this year and maybe get rid of some of that holiday weight. Buy Vite Ramen today. All right. Speaking of losing money on a product, a really stretch trying to make is a pretty much a fail. But much like this graphics card seems to be a fail. See, there I can just have an easy tie-in, Dan. I just screw up the transition and then say, but like me screwing up that transition, it seems NVIDIA is screwing up this next product with story number 2. 3090 Ti is still Vaporware, is what I named this story. And I have a little write-up. Oh, how the 3090 Ti saga continues. A couple weeks ago, Moore's Law Z leaked that the 3090 Ti doesn't just have yield issues, or, in quotes, as other people report, reported BIOS issues, the entire PCB may need to be redesigned. In short, number one, Nvidia doesn't have as many yields able to sustain high clock speeds at an absurd 450 watt TDP as they thought they would, according to my sources. That means they will either have a comically small amount of samples for sale, or they will need to use more voltage on the average card. If they need more voltage, that means the PCBs from most AIBs may require a complete PCB redesign and or a higher than 450 watt TDP. And in fact, Moore's Law is dead has been tipped off that the EVGA Kingpin model of the 3090 Ti that has two 12 pins capable of sustaining 1275 watts is specifically highlighted as a card that may be one of the few 3090 Ti models ready anytime soon, maybe in April, but that is because it is so over-engineered it doesn't need a redesign. Finally, the last thing I will say is the BIOS issues, again in quotes, doesn't make sense at this point. BIOS issues can be solved. They aren't unpredictable. They're not unknown unknowns. If it was just a BIOS issue, Nvidia would still roughly know the specs and be able to confirm, therefore, a release date, which they said they were going to in January, but they haven't confirmed it. All of this then points to something much bigger than BIOS issues being the culprit, at least in Moore's Law is Dead's opinion. And again, that's why I go back to saying I stand by my sources that say it's having yield issues and might need a full PCB redesign.
I mean, it makes sense, and to some extent, they don't really have any incentive to say anything about this right now. They got their story out, and to me, it almost just feels like this is just going to try to silently be canceled, or they're just going to put a few thousand on the market or something before Lovelace comes out, because I don't know how they market this thing if it's coming out in April.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I asked one of my sources, like, but isn't it weird they haven't said literally anything, when I was really digging into it? And he goes, well, what are we going to say? We fucked up? Because that's really all NVIDIA has to say about the 3090 Ti at this point. And I agree. I mean, from where I'm sitting, I feel like in April, there might be the Kingpin and a couple other models come out and do the rounds, trying to show something 10% or more stronger than a 3090 while using absurd amounts more energy, so they can try to push a few of the reviewers to using the 3090 Ti Kingpin as the new benchmark card for CPU reviews coming up. But like the 5800X 3D, and soon Raptor Lake in Q3, Zen 4 possibly in Q3, actually, from what it sounds like actually recently. All of those things, because Lovelace probably won't be ready by then. But that's really all this card is for. It's as far as I am concerned, there isn't really any availability expected. And all of my sources have said that they've been told things like, it's like getting a Veyron. You're not going to see it at every VW dealership or something, at every Porsche or Bugatti dealership. That this is something that will be very rare to see.
Yeah, and I just think their initial announcement of that really speaks to it, where they just showed you I just remember in that press conference, it almost seems like they weren't even sure what to show you, so they just kept cutting to a 3090 and then cutting back to the guy holding it and cutting back into a zoomed shot on it, because there's nothing to say about the 3090 Ti as an actual product. It's just this vague thing that we know apparently exists, even though as it seems that Nvidia doesn't even know what the 3090 Ti is. And
again, just to be clear, let me click this, and there is no page for the 3090 Ti on their website, guys. Still, they announced it over a month ago. What's going on? That is weird. There should at least be a page on the website.
Yeah, it's undeniable that there isn't some major issue with the 3090 Ti that is preventing them from even doing some type of paper launch of it, because what we have right now is a paper launch, I guess.
A paper launch, a paper announcement. one might say.
Yes.
Not even a paper launch. Daniel Dua writes in, "Hi, Tom. When we talk about 1,000-watt graphics cards and the operating costs they bring, it's starting to get hard to compare power usage to other equipment I use at my house. Can we change convention and start referring to GPUs with their respective horsepower ratings? Like 1 kilowatt Hopper would be a 1.3 horsepower GPU. I would love to start to compare the power of my weed whacker and lawnmowers to my gaming hardware."
Let's do it, man.
It's just hilarious, though. I had to read that goofy comment here because, I mean, that's where we're getting.
Yeah. The all new Honda Grom powered by 18 3090 Ti's.
Yeah, exactly. Well, would that be...
I don't think that would be enough.
No. Anyways, though, let us move on to a card that might have enough to take the crown. Story number 3, Dan's face is just so disappointed with that tie-in again. RX 6950 XT specs are all but confirmed. And here's my write-up. Rumors have been swirling around of an RDNA 2 refresh for quite some time. And yours truly just 100% confirmed a few things in a series of tweets and in part of a recent ARC video. In summary, the RX 6X50, as they're often referred to cards, are still based on 7 nanometer. Not 6 nanometer, and 18 gigabit per second memory is the minimum one should expect. That is soon to be low-end speeds, according to Moore's Law Z sources. And again, guys, there's a reason the 6500 XT has 18 gigabit per second memory. Yes, it's a last-minute overclock, but also it costs about the same as 14 gigabit at this point. In fact, one source told me that they practically don't even make the 14 anymore. It's all just underclocked 18 that are shipped, or like barely didn't meet 18 specification. So at this point, I think we can expect these to have at least 18 gigabit. I was told to be more likely one gets like 20 gigabit per second than 16 for any of these refreshed cards, and we should expect RDNA 3 to probably have some crazy clock speeds. But moving on, number 3 about this, though. And the RX 6950 XT is confirmed and likely to be the first one to launch of these refreshes against the arguably fake 3090 Ti. After the 6950 XT, which Greymon has tweeted should have at least 2.5 gigahertz clock speeds. Technically, I can't confirm the other ones are coming out, and I have heard references to a 6650 XT, a 6750 XT. I think that one specifically makes a lot of sense to like try to make the 6700 XT at least 10% stronger, so it's almost a 3070 Ti to take on ARC. And then also I know there's a 6850 XT that's been thrown around, but I'm not so sure about that one coming out. None of these are technically 100% confirmed by me, although all of these cards are being considered by AMD. And the other thing I will say is that I suspect there will be a big drop or leak of information at some point in the next few days. I think most people know most things, and so don't be surprised if someone else leaks more information about this before this podcast even finishes being edited, is all I'm saying. There's a chance I might do a last minute edit if that happens, but I think for the most part I'll say, guys, the 6950 XT is confirmed. Based on the clock speeds I'm seeing, it'll be 10% better than the 6900 XT, and everything else can be launched whenever AMD wants to launch them. But no, we should expect all of these to launch at the same time.
I mean, I think we've talked about the X50 things cards a lot at this point. I don't think there's too much more to be said other than I think the fact that 18 gigabit per second kind of being the standard now makes sense why they would push to release these, even if they can still keep making their other stuff where, like, as a spot opens up in the market, there's more money to be made sometimes by just putting out a new model. And, these cards have been out for over a year. They're getting a little long in the tooth. Something new needs to come out.
I mean, and it just makes sense to have out if you can. Right. Yeah. I think a lot of times people keep thinking, well, why does this make sense? How will this be priced? It's like, I don't know. How do you even know they'll have an MSRP? The fact is, yields are really good. They probably never even needed an RX 6800, Like, they might as well move to overclock 6900 XTs, and then they probably only have yields after that just for normal 6800 XTs. They have faster RAM to put on all of them. I just think it's common sense that you do this once availability starts improving so that you have better cards out once pricing starts mattering again and you're competing with Alchemist.
Yeah. And once again, having to talk about Alchemist, having cards out that come out around Alchemist just makes sense to dampen the press that Alchemist gets. Where like, oh, we have these cards that are coming out that are competing with AMD's previous generation. Now here's our little mid-gen refresh that beats all of these to some extent.
Yeah, and in fact, then let's move on to what was going to be a different story there, Dan. Let's rearrange the order here, because I think, again, if you think about, I suspect a lot of people are going to start leaking stuff that's like, oh, you guys didn't know this card was launching this. It's like, no, I think anyone could have guessed the 6950 XT launches first because the 3090 Ti was supposed to come out first, and that any other cards are launched to fight Alchemist, right?
And I just think if it's possible to, releasing your flagship card first just makes the most sense, where it was pretty clear previously AMD was a little less coherent with their launches because I think they were just putting out what they could,
Oh yeah. So any 6750 XT, 6650 XT, which is again adding 10% performance to the full dies that are already, they still haven't launched a 6700 non-XT, guys. They don't need to. The yields are great. This is to head off ARC, which leads us then into story number 4. Moore's Law Z confirms Intel Arc is effectively launching Q2 among a flurry of cooler leaks. Here is a write-up. Finally, people besides Moore's Law Z are leaking the Intel cooler Tom had pictures of a year ago. What does this mean? Well, that Arc is likely a couple months away if you go back and look at when RDNA 2 cooler leaks were happening all over the place, which places it when? In Q2. That's right, the cooler leaks are not a coincidence. Arc is coming, and that is coming in Q2, effectively like we have been hinting since late 2021. In summary, any Q1 launch from Alchemist is unlikely to have substantial volume. They're almost assuredly all be paper launches that happen then. Also, low-end Alchemist should launch by the end of April for laptop, with maybe some of the high-end Arc dies launching in laptop at the very end of April as well. And thus, late April through June is when we can be confident there will be real launches for Alchemist cards on desktop, with multiple sources stating that PAX East is a possible unveiling date a weekish before the desktop launch. So the culprit for the delay from Q1, Intel wants their drivers and software to be fully competitive and reliable on release, and they are willing to wait for it. And if you think about it, that makes sense. What's the worst case scenario of delaying a graphics card a couple months? You'll just have a larger launch of volume on day one, which matters in this market right now, in drivers with less things to complain about. And reviewers are very critical right now. So, I mean, I don't know, Dan, I think we've been dancing around Alchemist being Q2, basically me and you saying mostly Q2, probably Q2. Now I'm just saying Q2. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, we have a month and a half, I guess, in Q1 still. Maybe there will be a paper launch, but it's just feeling less and less likely that it would be Q1 to begin with. Intel was never super firm on their thing. They just had their release dates. They kind of just had that press thing to say, hey, I know you guys have been talking about this for 2 years now. Yep. We're putting out discrete graphics cards. Woohoo. And I think more than anything, especially in the way the market currently is, that Intel is in a really good position to capitalize off of how bad AMD and Nvidia are being perceived right now. So if they could launch in high volume with their BIOS is working well, and their drivers working well with all of their competitive features against FSR and DLSS working, and with decent ray tracing, they could really make a giant splash if all of their features were at least competitive with AMD's ray tracing and FSR. I think they could make a gigantic splash if they were truly competitive in every way and their drivers didn't suck. Because if they came out with bad driver support, it would be well, this is good, I guess. It's cheaper or whatever. It's at a competitive pricing. It's high volume, but also the drivers kind of suck, which is a criticism I think that companies have a really hard time getting away from,
Yeah, I mean, I would say, again, and we have to be careful how we discuss this, because it's AMD unfortunately did have bad drivers around RDNA 1's launch. But I would say that, yeah, it still haunts AMD to this day that they are supposedly have worse drivers than Nvidia, which for a while there, this was provably wrong. But because they did a couple times and it was really bad and they did a bad job of handling the messaging, people still just say AMD has bad drivers. And I think Intel both doesn't want that to happen. And again, you know, they have a ton of people writing these drivers. They're a huge company with a ton of resources. Giving them 2 extra months, from what I've heard, the one thing they weren't sure they'd have is a good recording app like Relive or Shadowplay. And give them a couple extra months to launch a graphics card. Yeah, maybe they can write an app that's out by then.
Actually, you know, given how much people talk about that, even though, once again, I don't know how important of a feature that really is to most people.
It's very important for me, to be fair, but I'm not the average guy.
That's true. But, like, you know, lacking a feature is lacking a feature. And if Intel can be in a position where they're not lacking features, I think they will be much better received than they would be otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess I'm trying to think if there's really anything else to say about this. I don't know. Honestly, not really. I mean, I'm sure something will launch in March as a paper launch so they can claim that it launched on time. But as far as I can tell, it's really not until May that you should... It depends how you phrase the question. If someone puts a gun to your head and you're like, if you get what's the earliest month you would even consider risking your life on? Yes, I could see some launches in April, but I wouldn't risk my life until April. I mean, May,
when's their next investor call? Do you remember?
I don't know. No.
Okay. I mean, I would assume they're probably going to want to have something by then, even if it's a paper launch.
It's a good question, though. Let me see here. Oh, there's one on the 17th, so I don't know. That's too close, guys.
Yeah, okay.
But I think there was another Intel. I know there's another Intel day they're having sometime around PAX as well, a little before it, that they'll probably want to at least unveil some stuff too. But anyways, let us move on to another graphics card launch. Story number 5, AMD RDNA 3 confirmed to be a hybrid of 5 nanometer and 6 nanometer nodes. And quoting here from Video Cards with a little bit of editing by me, earlier this week, AMD CEO made her first comments this year on the RDNA 3 consumer graphics architecture. The company is now set to launch the first Navi 3X GPUs by the end of this year, alongside its new Zen 4 Raphael CPUs. AMD had not yet confirmed the fabrication nodes for these GPUs. Although most rumors seem to suggest a hybrid of 5 and 6 nanometer nodes, it seems that those rumors have finally been confirmed by an AMD employee who listed these new GPUs on his LinkedIn profile. Not only does he list each of the Navi 3X GPUs, but also the nodes each of them use. According to this profile post, Navi 31 and 32 are to utilize 6 nanometer and 5 nanometer nodes, while Navi 33 is supposedly a monolithic 6 nanometer card. This indirectly confirms the rumors that Navi 33 will be the only monolithic GPU in the series, and this does line up with some other leaks I've been seeing on Twitter recently and some things I've been told as well. So there you go, Dan. What do you think?
I think we've for a while guessed at least that 31 would be an MCM design, and I guess this just confirms that they're really going for it with 32 also being MCM as well. I think the existence of, MI200 kind of, at least to me, confirmed that the next line of RDNA cards would also be MCM. But the only other alternative explanation I can think of, which I think we've discussed this, could be that... No, that doesn't really make sense. Is that for some reason maybe they were 31 and 32 were being designed on both 6 and 5 nanometer, but that's all I could think of as an alternate explanation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I usually only follow the top cards, and then some of the bottom ones. I rarely care to say everything about everything in the lineup. I mean, even just look at my arc leaks, guys. I basically mostly followed on the top one. And then the 128 execution unit mono, which, as luck would have it, is most of what they're doing is just 2 dies. But I feel like if you know the top and you know the bottom, you can guess the middle, and that's not that important. But that does mean that there's a bit of a blind spot there for me. That is a bit surprising that it seems like there's 2 different types of MCM dies. That they're doing as far as I can tell, some mega dual GPU, but then also another dual MCM with an IO controller as well. For some reason, I suspected that what they would do is just one big dual die, then one of the dies can be used by itself without an IO controller, and then they'd have some 6nm monolithic card, which makes a lot of sense to do that. But it seems like, it seems like this pretty much confirms the rumors that they're going with a shit ton more FP32 cores for the very top dual MCM card.
Yeah, and it also it also confirms that the layout will be, like you said, like not two identical dies, but like an IO and an IO and then another die with that.
Mm-hmm. I guess the only other thing I have to say about this is, I mean, look, I'm going to have more RDNA 3 leaks coming. Although, I gotta say again, I basically confirmed the rough performance, launch date, pricing, power consumption. I don't know why you need more for making your purchasing decision than what I've said. And I try to stay away from a lot of the specific specs until we're much closer to launch, because I just think it's an easy mistake to overly read into specs and think you know everything because of previous architectures.
I mean, you're correct. You can't just... I mean, obviously, every architecture is to an extent based off of the previous architecture, but I don't think you can just infinitely extrapolate to what that means. Like, this could be a bigger redesign than we think it is. You never know until they actually unveil it or more leaks closer to its unveiling come out. Because as it stands right now, I don't think until we're closer to launch, I don't think leaks will be that informative on what RDNA 3 is.
Mm-hmm. Besides just kind of adding more to what we basically already know. And it's going to roughly double performance. It's going to use probably 400 watts at least for the top card. And it's going to be pretty expensive. But again, it's, insane performance. So the last thing I will add about this is the more I talk to some sources and probe around, the more this seems like an MCM Ampere situation. Like, there's always latency, right, that you just add by going MCM. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what this is going to do if you wanted like 480 hertz gaming in 1080p. I doubt it's going to be as much of a performance increase as you'd think. And I think that's where a lot of people go, no shit, but I would say, but RDNA 2 like way upped 1440p and 1080p gaming performance. Its scaling in all resolutions was impressive. It wasn't like Ampere where it's not fair to say this, but it does look its best in 4K. I think this will look its best in 4K. I think this is going to be an architecture where that roughly doubling or a little above doubling performance happens at super high resolutions. It's just going to have a ton of infinity cache. I mean, based on what I'm told, probably 512 megabytes, which I think I already said somewhere in a previous video like last year. But,
that'll massively up 4K performance if my understanding of infinity cache is correct.
Right. It'll massively increase it. But also, I would say if it's 512 megabytes, keep in mind, guys, that doesn't mean it's just like a linear 4 times the cache effective boost that you got. It's also to mitigate the latency. But if you have a ton of latency and you're making an expensive graphics card, you can probably guess people are going to use this for 4K or higher. So what do? Probably pack in a ton of FP32 cores like Ampere did, because you're never going to get over the fact that higher latency somewhat limits what you can do at ultra high frame rates in 1080p. But as long as they're bogged down, you can find ways to say this thing is twice as strong as the previous generation.
Yeah, and as it stands, I don't think there's really a reason to... I don't think there's a reason to emphasize 1080p performance over 4K performance, because, I think there is some reason maybe someone would get the top die if they're for 1080p gaming if they're like an esports person, but at a certain point, like what can you get for a monitor? Can you get like a 360 hertz monitor? Do 480 hertz exist?
They do.
I guess maybe for like... a couple hundred people, that might be good.
But if that's what you're going to do, and I understand we're now getting to 4K 240 hertz monitors by the time this comes out. Okay, fine. Sure. But most people at high resolutions are probably in 1440p or 1080p. And if you think about Navi 33, but that's going to be monolithic. So the latency issues are gone. That's going to be on 6 nanometer. What can they probably do with that? I don't know. I don't remember what the exact specs I've been told that it is, but it's like, I don't know. If I was AMD, I'd probably just make it like a 400 millimeter squared because it's a super mature node. right? Yeah, that would be my 400 millimeter squared on 6 nanometer. So what can I do with that? I don't know, 64 compute units at 3 gigahertz, almost 3 gigahertz.
Yeah, maybe.
That'll do your 1080p 360 hertz just fine, and you don't need the MCM design anyways.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to a question here from Rob Durka. Hey, Tom and Dan. First of all, I just joined the Patreon as a bit of a thank you for keeping me ahead of the market in computer hardware. Your reliable info has been incredibly useful to me as an investor in this space. Thank you. Remember, technically, this isn't financial advice, though. He goes on, my question is regarding Intel. They've been talking a big game, but I still question how they will execute in the future in discrete graphics cards, CPUs, and eventually having cutting-edge fabs again. Do you see Intel truly transitioning back into a leadership role in manufacturing? How soon is DG2 going to be the savior that we all need? Well, yes, 2 different questions. First of all, is DG2 going to be the savior we all need? I mean, look, I know they're making a ton of cards. We're going to have to wait for launch day.
Yeah, all I'll say is I think that remains to be seen. I think Intel in particular has an incentive to do that as a new entrant into the market, but maybe they won't release their cards at competitive prices. Maybe their cards will drift above MSRP just like everything else does.
And I would say that just don't miss what matters. Data center, and Intel's going to be behind for a few years still, guys. So is DG2 going to be the savior we need? Maybe, but we won't actually even know at launch day. We need to wait. Like, if it comes out even at high volume, it doesn't fix the market overnight. Like, it's going to be at least months before that volume is bought up, people prove it's reliable, and we see that force other prices down. So that remains to be seen. In terms of your question, do you see them truly transitioning back into a leadership role in manufacturing? Meaning, do I think they're going to leapfrog TSMC and Node? No. I think they might tie them in 4 years.
Yeah, and I think they're going to be releasing Intel's at least going to be releasing products that are competitive with TSMC manufactured products, but TSMC is just so far ahead right now, at least when it comes to their node, that's going to be a while before they just catch back up to them again.
And what does that even mean to be a leader in manufacturing as well? Do they have a node that's 5% better than TSMC? Because we're going to be splitting hairs if Intel does take the crown. And if it's a 5% lead, is it really a lead? I think 4 years minimum. And even then it's like, I don't see it soon, but I do see it being less of an issue over time. All right. Let us move on then to story number 6. Google to drop Stadia, cloud gaming service reportedly deprioritized. I'm quoting here from Data Center Knowledge, who's doing their summary of what Business Insider said. So Google, which sought to enter the high-growth video games market, long dominated by hardware-centric platforms, may be calling its quits on its fledgling cloud gaming service, Stadia. Instead, the company is looking to potentially license a proprietary game streaming technology to other companies, which transmits games in high definition with low latency, according to the Insider. The move to selling the underlying cloud tech has seen Stadia deprioritized within Google, with the company now less interested in securing licenses for AAA third-party titles. Which, did they secure any? I mean, what the heck? Because the new white label streaming service will be called Google Stream. Google has spoken with both exercise bike maker Peloton and Bungie, the developer behind the popular shooting game Destiny. Right? So with it saying that they would use their stream service with Peloton for their exercise bike games, and all of this really seems to point to, if this is true from Business Insider, that Google is looking to make its streaming tech more general purpose and more of a thing for other things, because they're just not going to be a successful console competitor anytime soon. And the end of it goes, Insider said the largest problem for Stadia was player retention, with the service falling short of its goal by 25%. Stadia expected to sign up 1 million monthly active users by the end of 2020, which has failed to do. So I thought this was worth bringing up because this is a challenge to gaming hardware. This is news if this happens.
Yeah, and I think it just speaks to the fact that streaming really just isn't there yet as I think a as a primary way to play a video game, streaming just isn't there yet. I think Google was the first one that thought that they could do it, and based on what I've heard, xCloud is pretty decent. I think.
Well, so I think PS Now for Gaikai was the first one to think they could do it, but then they forgot they had it.
Yeah, and most people that have it are like, I guess it works, but some people complain about latency. Some people don't. With
It
PS
seems
Now,
to be
based on my
falling behind the
understanding.
competition at this point.
But I just don't think, as far as I know, with any service, I would trust streaming as my primary way to play video games. It would be a supplementary thing that I might get if I feel I needed it, which I personally don't. But Stadia was, I think, like the first one to say, well, this is the primary way you're going to play games is through streaming, and that's just not there yet. I don't know when it will be there. I'm less optimistic about streaming, or we're less optimistic about streaming than I think some people seem to be, because there is just the fact that latency is an unavoidable product of streaming, you know?
And it always will be. It's physics.
Yes, if you have a wire that can transmit data at the speed of light, if you're communicating with someone from the other side of the earth, there's a noticeable delay Now, maybe that data center instead is, I don't know, 600 miles away or something, or 200 miles away. Okay, it's going to reduce latency a little bit, but the data transmission isn't perfect like a direct light speed line. So there's just always going to be latency that you cannot get rid of unless our infrastructure gets way better than it is right now. And even if it was, I think there would still be issues with it.
Yeah, and this reminds me of the Broken Cell kind of did with John Petty Research, where he was like, no, I think game streaming is coming just like Netflix. And I remember going, I don't think so. And it's because whatever you're doing to make streaming cheaper, I suspect the $400 box that you can buy a console is always going to be getting better for the same price as well. And as far as I can tell, what is GeForce Now up to? 4K 60 or something with tons of latency, and most of the packages are really closer to 1080p 60. Okay, so I have to pay a monthly fee to game worse than a $400 console. Why would I do that? That's always going to be true, in my opinion. Always. Your streaming tech gets better. The $400 box gets better. And now you don't have latency issues.
Unless you can have enough data centers distributed, like, that's the problem, though. They would need to be distributed throughout, like, every town, or at a minimum, I think every region would need some of these data centers. And at a certain point, it's like, well, how much are you going to invest in this infrastructure to make it work?
It's almost like you have to bring a console to everyone's house to remove the latency issue, isn't it, guys?
Yeah, and Google Stadia, it's just, well, this is our entire platform is streaming, and it never seemed to work that great as far as I can tell. So, you know, instead of focusing on it as a platform, Google has a bunch of computers that they need to do something with. So might as well do stream Peloton games on it or something. It makes sense.
Which, you know, and it's not to say I think game streaming does not have a future. I do. I just don't see it making other things obsolete. I see it expanding the market. I think it's going to be an excellent use for that, like, again, what they initially showed. Like, they're like, we may even have a free version of Stadia that's like 720p, 60 hertz. You can just play an old Assassin's Creed literally for free, and we can have dynamic ads that appear if you're in, or like, you know, if you're in a new Watch Dogs and that was being streamed, you could have dynamic ads appear, live ad placement on the billboards you're walking past. And it's like, yeah, and that makes it so you don't need to even charge them to play this game in 720p. And you know who's playing this game in 720p? Someone who wasn't going to buy the game anyways. This is expanding the market. But I just don't see it replacing consoles or PC gaming.
Yeah.
I stand by it. All right. Let us move on then to story number 7. Nvidia acquisition of ARM collapses. UK company to seek an IPO instead. Quoting from Tech Power Up, Nvidia's long-awaited acquisition of ARM Ltd is collapsing, confirmed the Financial Times and Reuters. According to the latest information, the deal is not happening, and the previously agreed to terms are no longer valid. As we now know, Nvidia will have to pay SoftBank a break-free bill of $1.25 billion for the failure, which was the deal that the two settled on if it fails. Nvidia has originally planned to purchase ARM for $40 billion. However, the regulators from the UK EU have been blocking the deal from happening on the terms that would hurt competition and block innovation. What is next for ARM Ltd? Well, and also the US. Tech Power Up, by the way. Hello. Yeah. That was the final nail. And as far as I'm aware, that China was going to jump on the bandwagon if all three of these areas didn't get it too. But continuing, what is next for the ARM Ltd? Well, it's trying to go public and list itself on one of the world's biggest stock exchanges, either domestically or overseas in the U.S. The IPO efforts of ARM are estimated to be worth around $80 billion, representing a double amount of what Nvidia wanted to purchase the company for. Which, I mean, I don't know how much there is to say, but we had to have this as a story because we've been covering it for so long. And it's hilarious. This is like, I think an episode, what is it? This will come out like 3 weeks after the Richard Hogue one where we talked about it as well. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah. Well, the fact that they're going public is, how many times have we said that this has failed? It's now like triple confirmed that it's not happening. And the fact that I guess they're trying to go public for $80 billion suggests that the original terms of the deal do not compute with the current value of the company at all. So just from that standpoint, it probably should fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else there is to say. I mean, it was announced. I think we all felt like it was going to be inevitable because, frankly, it just seems like companies kind of get away with whatever they do these days. Honestly, I think it was half of it. And Nvidia seems to as well, especially. Then you saw the EU step in, and I was like, ooh, 50-50. And then the US stepped in, and I was like, yeah, 90% dead. And then as time went on, and Richard Hogue said this, honestly, he's like, the percentage it fails goes up exponentially with every week that passes, that the US does not back down from the investigation. And, you know, when I finally decided it's definitely dead is when I realized, because some people suggested this, like, this, to me, this would be like, for Nvidia to defend this deal going through to the FTC, they'll have to prove that they haven't been anti-competitive in the past. And the FTC will all of a sudden, in a public forum, start arguing why Nvidia's always been anti-competitive. And why would you want that circus to pay legal bills for that to happen? And then what it takes years, and then the EU stops its paws, jumps in, then the UK jumps in, then China jumps in. This deal was it always seemed like a long shot to a certain degree, but it's become so obviously not happening more and more as time went on. And I don't know. I don't have much else to say about it. Nvidia's still going to do fine. ARM's fine. And I'm glad this didn't go through.
Yeah.
And it might signal a lot of monopolistic things not going through soon. But today's video is brought to you by CDKOffer.com. Whether you're looking to get good deals on PlayStation, Microsoft Office Professional, or both Windows 10 and Windows 11 operating systems, CDKOffer.com has you covered. CDK is a long-term sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead, and that's because they have been consistently providing me and Moore's Law is Dead's fans with a service that I think PC gaming just needs. Reasonable operating system and Microsoft Word prices. We all have to use these products, and we don't need to overpay for them if you use CDKeyoffer.com. And you know what? I know I will be using these products later this year for a new Raptor Lake or Zen 4 system, most likely, and I will do so knowing that, well, they're all legitimate keys, and they are going to be delivered to me quickly and promptly when I buy them. Don't waste any more money than you need to this year. Use the link in the description or on screen to go to cdkeyoffer.com, and when you're there, whatever you decide to buy, make sure you use one of these offer codes. Broken Silicon gets you 25% off all Windows products, and Daishin gets you 3% off everything else. And this really does help the channel. It helps you save money. Use these offer codes. Use the link. Go to cdkeyoffer.com today. All right. Moving on to other shady things, let us get to story number 8. AMD pays for day one lower pricing. And so I just released the video before we started recording this episode. What is it titled? AMD's fake day one MSRP, paying AIBs to hide higher pricing. I don't have a write-up, but I'll summarize what's in it. Basically, for the 6500 XT launch and for some, at least some of the other RDNA 2 launches, AMD has been paying some of their closest AIBs, which I'm not going to name names, but like which ones are closest to AMD guys, have been... basically, they'll ship a card that isn't profitable at the MSRP or that they don't want to sell at the MSRP, and AMD pays them the difference for like half of the day one stock, which is different than what NVIDIA has been doing, to be clear. This isn't like NVIDIA shipping 10 cards at MSRP and then the rest at $400, like the 3050. This is not that scummy, to be clear. And it's funny, I saw some people in the Moore's Law Said Discord go, from that title, I expected it to be even worse. And it's like, no, it's not as bad as the things NVIDIA is doing. But at the end of the day, it is dishonest. And a thing that I added in, because I know you watched an early draft of the video, Dan, you helped on it a bit, like that I added but that you didn't see, is, you know, at the end of the day, can we just say this to both AMD and NVIDIA? I understand why you're doing this. Prices are up, and also you can get away with higher pricing. But can we just stop with the smoke and mirrors? Enough.
Yeah, I know.
Just say it costs more. It's $250 then. Say it's a $250 card. NVIDIA, admit it. The 3050 isn't really out. Say the launch 3050 is $400, but prices will drop. We can take the truth. Because at a certain point, we're not going to trust anything you guys say anymore.
And I guess I don't know if it would have done or helped anything with the current pricing if it would have just been priced at $250, but I don't know. Maybe there's this hope that if they were just honest about the pricing and stopped pulling this kind of crap, that maybe at some point it would kind of stabilize to something closer to the realistic, to the stated MSRP.
Which they do think will happen. But it's kind of like NVIDIA launching the GA106 based 3050 with a completely fake availability and pricing first. They will have GA, and we're going to get to it in a second, that, you know, in the wrap up. They are launching GA107 3050s, and those will be able to be at MSRP once pricing and shipping improves in the summer. But they wanted to pretend it was out now before ARC's out. Same with AMD. AMD lied less, but at the end of the day, they know that this won't be a sub $200 card until summer. But they think it will be, honestly. But they wanted it out now. Should they have just called it $250? I kind of think so. But I think so from a consumer-facing standpoint. From a evil demon on your shoulder arguing against the angel, I would say, you know, if I popped up on AMD's shoulder with devil horns on, I would say, hey, lying's only going to benefit you. Maybe you should have just pretended it's $150, actually.
Yeah, and I just think that there's less and less tolerance of that in the community, and people are just, you know, like has been the entire story of the 6500 XT. People are just getting progressively more angry about it, where if we're really looking at it, the 6500 XT held at least close-ish to MSRP compared to other cards for way longer, even though I'm looking at them now, and you can still get one model for $270, but now it's largely unavailable, and the other one is now up to $364. So yeah, this idea that it would increase in price but hold close to MSRP now is true.
Yeah, it is. And it's holding close, but it isn't going to be at it.
I just don't think there's almost a benefit to even pretending this anymore, because people just seem to get mad now when a graphics card is launched, and it's like, oh, you're telling me it's $200. I know you're lying. Why are you telling me it's $200? When maybe the press would be better if they just didn't try to pull this type of crap anymore. Maybe. I don't know.
And this leads to a greater discussion. You know, I say this in the video as well, that I could have leaked this last week or next week, but I decided to do it now when I finally knew what I wanted to say about what's going on with this market. In many ways, this leak, which again, as I say, is true, I had to talk about it. Frankly, if I'm critical of NVIDIA, it's not fair if I'm not critical of AMD. But I did use this leak to rope you guys in for maybe listening to my arguments on what might happen if MSRP goes away. And I know one thing you brought up, Dan, is at the end of the day, first of all, let's just say this. Benchmarks need to start being separated from reviews. The way that you do reviews has to be after a card's out, after you evaluate its availability, because there are four things to consider now. You know, price, performance, features, and availability. This is going to, in a world where graphics cards are a commodity like food that keeps getting bought up and everyone needs them because they're so useful for so many things, you can benchmark the cards and do a day one benchmarking saying this is how it performs. But the review over what's being worth buying over other things, reviewers need to start doing a separate video for the actual review, because you can't give a good opinion of the card on day one until you know if it's actually available.
Yeah, and the benchmarks, I don't think that much changes about a lot of it changes with the review. I think the benchmarks, you just start calling it a benchmark, and maybe your conclusion sections are slightly truncated and moved to next week or a week and a half from now when you can better evaluate availability. And benchmarks are still incredibly useful for day one buyers, because it's like they see, okay, this is how it performs. Is it worth buying it for the prices that it launched at if I can, get access to it? And if it's not, they still won't buy it. So it still does provide like early purchasing decisions. It's just, I don't think you can stamp a recommendation for a purchase recommendation right now until you know what availability is long-term going to look like, which we just don't know that, or long-term availability and pricing is going to be.
And then I would say to reviewers, there you go, you got 2 pieces of content instead of 1 now. Like, this doesn't hurt you. And I think there's this assumption that if we don't do day one reviews, if we don't have our full review on day one, we'll get less views. Where's the evidence of this? I think you have day one benchmarks. That's it. And then, because I've been looking at some other tech channels of similar subscriber counts, and their reviews for graphics cards get like 1/4 of what mine do. And my reviews come out months after the card's out. And it's because there's something unique about I'll say it, I'll toot my own horn here. There's something unique about the way I'm reviewing a graphics card. I sit around with it for like a month. I really compare it. I really use it. I really give my full opinion. It's not rushed. I've had time to look at how available it is and what I actually feel like it was worth the money I spent, or if you did spend that much. And my views are fine, compared to people of similar channel sizes. Much better, actually, for my reviews on average. So then what is there to lose? This is something I've heard the people at Sacred Symbols talking about, like day one video game reviews, or trying to get your video game review out a week before it's out. It's like, yeah, you might do fine if you just wait till after the launch. And a lot of channels do fine. You just have to put more thought into it. And I think it's time, if the market changes, the way we do business has to change.
Yeah. I that's the thing. It's not to say there's any issue with the way reviews have been done, because I think it's just when the market changes, the way you have to evaluate the value of a product inevitably has to change. Like, if houses were at a fixed price for like square footage or whatever, or we just sold models of houses, and it's like, well, this house, this is how much this costs. If then that model was broken away from, and we got our current model of how houses are evaluated, okay, well then the way you dictate how you buy a house changes. It's an inevitability when the market changes, the way you evaluate it has to change. And I think if this were like a flash in the pan, like a year, like 1 year of weird pricing, okay, well then it's just a weird fluke year. But I don't think this is going to stop completely for a long time, if ever.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say that word you said, what is this specifically?
The expectation that a card is necessarily going to be cheaper a year from when it releases. Like, so in 2012, you could reasonably say a graphics card that's $400 in 2012, 2013 would probably be $250 or $300. That's just not true anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's in this market, it might be more than it was. I think probably is. And that inherently changes the way you have to think about the market. And once again, like if it was just a year of that where prices just don't decrease 1 year for some weird reason, okay, well then it was 1 year, but now it's going on like 2 years. I don't see it changing anytime soon. Maybe if this chip shortage that we're currently in abates, maybe we'll go back to what it used to be like. But, I think it was called the 2021 chip shortage or the 2020 chip shortage. Maybe we're just in a perpetual chip shortage for the next 5 or 6 years or something.
And I don't think it'll be a shortage in 2023 like we're seeing now. It'll feel like it's over. But clearly something's changed, though, in the way this operates. And, it's funny how much we're talking about, like, MSRP and stuff after me leaking AMD paying for, day one pricing to feel more like what they think it will be in a few months, which, again, isn't as bad as what Nvidia's doing, but it's still dishonest, But that's because I don't have much to say about AMD doing this. I think the more interesting conversation is, why does Nvidia feel like they have to manipulate the day one pricing when they should just say it costs more? Why does AMD? And it's because they're trying to hide that the prices are higher and that they will fluctuate. And I think over time, and I have heard people in the industry say this repeatedly to me, that they've noticed bad review after bad review after bad review, and they don't like it. And they think that having an MSRP is the main culprit. And so I think we're going to see, I think RDNA 3 will have MSRPs, and I think Lovelace will too. But it wouldn't surprise me if after that, the successive cards don't. Like, they just have a launch tier set of prices, or they even move to, what did I call it? TTP, temporary target price. Like, they might as well just call it that, because that's what it is. Like, they launch and say, our temporary target price for launch month is this. This is what we think it should cost if you're getting a good deal, but we can't promise it will stay that price forever. And then they just launch stuff with no promises after that. I think that's what we're going to start seeing more and more and more. Again, like, if you think about what happened with Turing, where there's a 2060 and then a 2060 Super, 2070 Super, 2060, now 12 gigabyte. 2060 12 gigabyte doesn't have an MSRP. I think we could see a situation where all of the TIs and Supers and extra core count and RAM count versions just don't have MSRPs as they release as many yields as makes sense for them to release randomly and just let the market decide what a product's actually worth themselves.
Yeah. I think that it seems that at least Nvidia is moving towards that, and it's yet to be seen if AMD will, but I think they probably will,
Yeah, and I would add on to that, one thing I point out in this video that I did, AMD's like fake day one MSRP, is short term what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to be confused about what something's worth because they're like, wait, I don't even know what this is supposed to cost. What do I do? But I think long term consumers will actually start asking harder questions because there's something weird that's been going on, I've noticed, in the past 5 years, where reviews on YouTube for graphics cards, half of the comments are just hoping they are told they're smart if they buy this. Like, and that's it. Like, they're not actually paying attention to the relative performance. You'll see people misquoting the relative performance of Vega to a 1080. And, like, no, they just bought what they were told they're smart if they bought. And if all you have is day one benchmarks, this means consumers will actually have to look at the benchmarks. They'll have to.
Yeah.
And this will mean consumers will go, well, if I don't know what the price is, okay. Just hypothetically, people will be like, I have a 6700 XT. It runs all my games actually really well. Actually, now that I think about it, it runs most of my games at 4K 120 that are a few years old. And there's no card I can't run with FSR in 4K, at least at 100 hertz or something. There's that one game I have that's really hard to run in 4K, but whatever. 1440p looks fine to me anyways. And you'll go, so what would I pay for something that made it even easier to run at 4K 120? Oh, probably not that much. Because my games run fine anyways. And I think you're going to have consumers look at the benchmarks, say, oh, that's what this can do compared to mine. Okay, how much more would I pay? And then they'll go to Newegg and say, oh, it costs way more than that. Yeah, I don't care. I think that's something that's going to happen eventually where these companies, someone put this in the Moore's Law's Discord after the video came out. Long term, this might just give companies more rope to hang themselves with, because if they don't let people make it easy what you say things should be worth, then that means people will decide for themselves, and they may find out they actually didn't need more performance for most of their games.
I hope that's what happens if this is where the market turns, because corporations being punished for screwing us over would be great to see.
Or again, it won't be punished so much as the actually good products will be more rewarded, and the fake ones will get less airtime. And
yeah,
at least I can't see it not at least a little bit happening that way. I don't see what happens is MSRP goes away and everyone keeps mindlessly buying. Because if you remove MSRP, I just don't think people will. I think they will. If you remove an official price, then people need to decide on their own, which is just going to make people more critical.
yeah.
All right, let's move on. Bullethead writes in, what do you think about Kyle Bennett's recent editorial, which addresses reasons why GPU manufacturers would abandon MSRPs? Well, the first part talks about AMD and Nvidia wanting to make more money is kind of obvious. His next point, that this move allows them to make TechTuber reviews of GPUs less influential in the market, was something I hadn't considered. Do you think there's any way for reviewers to combat GPU manufacturers, eliminating the obvious value metric? Could we see bill of materials estimates become the new MSRP equivalent? You see, if you actually read what Kyle Bennett wrote, which is status quo is no mo, which I actually ran into this while I was doing research for my video. What would that be? Friday or something? So I was like halfway done through the script and I found this and I was like, this guy's saying half of the same stuff I'm about to say. That's hilarious. Oh, and frankly, what we had already said in the die shrink that was already out that day.
Yeah.
You know, anyways, though, what do I think about it? I think it's a good write-up. And, link will be in the description, guys. I recommend people read it. But I actually want to skip ahead here to, do you think there's a way for reviewers to combat GPU manufacturers eliminating the value metric? Yeah, there was, but they didn't do it. So, that actually pisses me off when someone asks me that question. Yes, they would have said something about the 3080 12GB not having an MSRP. I'm aware I did and Steve at Hardware Unboxed did. Almost no one else did. Okay?
Yeah.
How could they have combated this? Not giving the 3050 a review when it didn't exist. 0 out of 10. Doesn't exist. But those things didn't happen. So what I think we've seen is it's easy to manipulate this system.
Yeah, and hopefully the market moves towards a different system where, like we said, like a bill of materials estimate, assuming you do a good job doing that estimate, could be informative, or just separating the review and the benchmarks, I think is the two ways you can easily combat the way the market's headed right now.
And I have to bring it up again. Like, I leaked Ampere's real value and how the MSRPs were fake for half of the cards in 2020, and so did Gamers Nexus, where he had the bill of materials for 3060s and said this card can't be made with 6 gigabytes below 250. Well, then why did the 3050 get a review? Prices are up. You know that card can't be made for 250. So there's a situation where he had the bill of materials. That was your chance to stop this, guys.
Yeah.
I think that needs to start happening. And there needs to be day one benchmarks, month later final reviews. That's what needs to happen. And it's what's going to happen, I think, because it's too late. The market's changing. GPU manufacturers are probably going to start removing pricing, and there will be a bunch of chaos short term. Long term, it's truly what I think is going to happen. And after the chaos is over, I think we'll actually be left with a smarter consumer base. But let us move on then to the final story. It's a story-filled episode here. Usually we only have 6, but today we're on story number 9. Story number 9. Best Buy adds Totaltech tier to their subscription services. Totaltech is a $200 annual membership subscription that Best Buy promotes quite heavily, probably due to knowing the profitability that you usually get with an add-on retail service. Positive aspects of the subscription are things like extended product warranty, extended return periods, free 2-day shipping, and an elevated level of service or after-sales help. Previously, one particularly highlighted benefit of Totaltech was access to, quoting, exclusive Totaltech member pricing. Has meant exclusive purchase access to hot tech like the PlayStation 5. Unfortunately, this policy is now also swept over NVIDIA's GeForce RTX 30 series product line, which holds some of the best GPUs on the market and the most sought-after ones. And so, there appears to have been some conditions built into the GeForce GPU paywalls to prevent scalping, but they weren't thought out that properly. For example, one scalper noted that if you sign up for this service, you can buy one of each SKU still. And let me see here. And the SKU means a stock keeping units refers to the particular model. Yet this same individual bought almost $20,000 worth of GPUs by going through Best Buy stock, grabbing one of each model and ordering it a minute or two after the previous order. Scalpers quickly sidestep Best Buy's implemented obstacles. This failing is severe. The Best Buy's position in the U.S. market as the exclusive Nvidia Founders Edition GPU reseller, effect that the scalpers gleefully highlighted to one another that it's now easier to get Founders models for scalping from Best Buy, the only people that sell them. And look, here's what's happened. Best Buy's added this $200 a year service. It's supposed to make it easier for you to get things at MSRP. But look, here's what I'll say, guys. I reached out to a few people that work at Best Buy in a few areas. So it was mixed input from the people there, what they thought. One of them highlighted that the scalper amounts and bot amounts they're dealing with are insane. That when they do drops of Founders cards or PlayStation 5s, for the first day, 99%, he said, I think he said like 95% or more of sales are to bots, but they cancel 90% of those because they find a way to prove it's a bot. And they're tired of having to deal with that. To be on this Total Tech membership, you need to provide an ID. You need to be a member who's bought from Best Buy before in the past. So there are a lot of real things in there. Having said that, though, I still can't help but feel like this is a last-minute cash grab before availability gets better and that scalpers will still use it. And I think the most important thing to highlight about this that a lot of people are missing is that the people that wanted things at MSRP aren't paying a $200 a year membership.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just giving access to, I guess, scalpers somehow on people that already were paying premiums, which is almost defeating the purpose. I mean, I guess you get extra perks with this, but I don't I don't know. I just saw that, and to me it screamed cash grab. Like, that's really the most I have to say about that, and I don't know, it seems a little slimy to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are overstating how much of a cash grab it is, that there are real attempts here to prevent scalpers, and that you can't even just like sign up and cancel it. Like they like have a weird system you have to go through to cancel the membership and get any money back, and it's like a prorated percent of how long you've had it. So like this really isn't something. They are trying to prevent scalpers, but at the same time it's like, still, if you're a scalper, you'll sign up for this and use it. Number one. Number two, anyone who isn't willing to pay extra over MSRP definitely isn't going to pay $200. The people that want cards at MSRP most, I don't think are going to jump on this.
Yeah.
That's the major issue I have that I don't think I've seen enough people say. But yeah, I did want to give our word on it as a full story, but we better get to the wrap up because it seems like my brain is slowly breaking down, Dan. So let us move on then here. Let me put down the timestamp. So here's the wrap up. We have quite a few things in the wrap up today. Let me see here. Where was this one? Yeah, okay. So first of all, we have Igor's Tech or Igor's Lab. Again, I'm falling apart, guys. Yeah, he confirmed that the 115 watt, which is closer to the power usage I expected if it wasn't clocked high, 3050 based on GA107 is coming. So there you go. And I said that was what's going to happen. I do find it a little funny people talking about, it seems like the GA107 model is coming out. And it's like, yeah, I said it would over and over.
Yeah.
But and I don't think you needed sources to know that. That's the only reason they would have disabled a GA106 card, even down to PCIe times 8. They're literally doing a temporary run so they can say the 3050s out before they launch the real 3050s. I'm
curious. Don't have much to say. I'm curious to see if there's any because I'm sure there will be some weird idiosyncrasies between the two different cards. I'm just curious to see how those turn out.
Yeah, one thing that's already been mentioned is that the GA106 models are expected to overclock better, like a lot better, which seems common sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have the I have this here, an honorable mention. RX 6400 has been pictured, and I put, who cares? I mean, I have nothing to say. Yep, there's another Navi 24 card for desktop that's going to suck. Then we have the MX 550 benchmarked. And I will say, I feel like some of the discussion around the MX550 benchmark is a little misleading. Like, people are like, it's losing to the R9 5900 HS and Passmark. It's like, I wasn't aware that's the most popular game people play. And people underemphasize that it seemed to beat the 450 by, let me see here, by like 30%. Yeah. So, or 40%. So, the 450 is definitely about as strong as a 5900 HS or stronger on average. So to me, this suggests something that is not as weak as a Saison APU, guys.
Yeah.
But I do think that still puts it where I thought it would be. Not stronger than Rembrandt. To be fair.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see when more benchmarks appear for it, because synthetic benchmarks are they're worth discussing to compare cards, I guess, but I think real world benchmarks are more important.
And this continues with my opinion that they shouldn't have made a 550 and a 570. What you're seeing called the 550 should be the 540. And what they're calling the MX570 should have just been the 550 if it wanted any chance of being good against Rembrandt. Because I think what you're looking at here at best will beat Rembrandt by like 10%. This is, I don't know. But moving forward, I thought this was interesting. Did you see this foldable OLED tech here?
Yeah, I looked at it a little bit. I mean, it seems kind of cool, but we'll see how foldable screens continue to develop, I guess.
Some of them work pretty well, though. I gotta say, the one that I liked was the foldable laptop, because that means you could completely unfold it and have like a big 20-inch display that you then hook up a controller to and game on. I'm like, now that's a laptop I'm interested in.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Also, we have Alder Lake N. So 8 Gracemont plus 32 execution units. The reason I bring this up, well, number one, that's an interesting micro APU that I can't wait to see tested. Number two, I was told about Alder Lake N a few months ago, or I think more than a few months ago. I just never got the specs, so I can verify this is real, guys. Let me see. Arc has mesh shaders like other graphics cards. I don't have much to add besides saying that, but again, it seems like Alchemist will have the latest rendering tech, even if it's not competing in the ultra high end. Intel is building a new, I assume based on the wording actually, integrated graphics card team in the UK. I thought that's an honorable, or a thing we should bring up, that Intel's building an entirely new GPU team in the UK. We also have benchmarks here for the i3-12100F, which I just want to point this out again, guys. It's a $120 i3 that's almost as good as a 5600X. And it seems to be as good as a 3600 or 50. Or I mean, like, this is just clearly the budget king here.
Yeah, I have less of a difficulty at this point making recommendations for CPU purchases versus like GPU, where if you're looking to build something on a budget, this is obviously the best choice at this point.
Yeah, and I do want to just highlight that again. It's like, what has PCIe 4.0? Alder Lake. And now you can get B660 motherboards that aren't expensive. You can get i3s that are as strong as a 5600X. And I know it sucks, but you can get like a $270 6500 XT that is about a 590 in that system if you want to. And this is just a substantially better building condition than what we had a year ago, which was just a nightmare.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and we say budget king, but like if you're only doing gaming, you're not sacrificing all that much with the 12100F, in my opinion. Like, you can game very, very well with those.
Yeah, especially if you're on 60 hertz and
yes.
or playing old games at 120 hertz. With the thing to note that this can be upgraded to 24 core Raptor Lake, guys. It's hard for me to recommend Zen 3 for anything anymore unless you already have a socket that fits it. But or unless Zen 3 gets dirt cheap, which it's getting there. Let's see. We also have Intel reaffirms their Bitcoin mining initiative, which this isn't the first time people have talked about this. Ian Cutchers was like, I already did a full story on this a few weeks ago, guys. But I do think it's notable Intel shared a picture and like reaffirmed these really are coming out. I don't know. What do you think about Intel making mining as far as I can tell, APUs or whatever, or just ASICs.
It was only a matter of time until one of the big three tech companies explicitly got into it, I think. You know, like, I'm not surprised Intel is doing it. I don't know if I'm surprised Intel in particular is, but I think it's just bound to have been one of the three eventually makes this because it's such a lucrative market.
Yeah, and I think there's been rumors that Samsung was going to do this for a very long time, that AMD was looking into it. I guess I agree. It might be a little surprising Intel's the first, but I bet they can give I don't even remember anymore. What's the big Bitcoin mining company?
Is it Bitmain?
Bitmain, yes. I bet Intel can give Bitmain a run for their money if they want to. The question is how much effort they're putting into it, though, because if they put like only a few million or 10 million into it, Bitmain does have billions now, though. They do specialize in it.
Yeah.
That'll be
they're not
interesting.
a tiny company.
That'll be very interesting to see, I think. Also, we have a leaked benchmark here of Intel Sapphire Rapids against Milan X, which I think is interesting because it seems like they basically tie each other.
That's good. I don't know much more to say.
Yeah, it's good, except that Sapphire Rapids is coming out half a year after Milan X and uses double the energy.
Of course, yeah. Yeah.
But again, we might have a narrow window where it's like, Intel almost caught up. This link I added here in this long list of links. I just wanted to highlight this, Dan. This is what is this? Let me see the speed here. 7.4 gigabyte per second Gen 4 M.2 SSD for $130. I think this is important to note for two reasons. It's been like, I built my Zen 2 system in late 2019 with a Gen 4 SSD that was $150 and was 5 gigabytes a second. And I've unfortunately been saying for 2 years, a year and a half-ish, it's pathetic that SSDs are more expensive than what I paid over a year ago. Well, here we have something that is a little cheaper and 50% faster. And that, again, goes to show you where we're at, where this is pretty good. And, it's heavily advertised for the PS5. No surprise. This easily meets Sony's specifications for putting it on a PS5. And again, well, there you go. So the Xbox Series X's ridiculous proprietary SSD that costs over $200 now looks stupid. And I think I just needed to highlight that because I just don't think people understood that. Like, the whole point of what Sony did wasn't because it'll be cheap on day one. It's because they knew within a year or so it'll be way cheaper to just let people buy their own SSD. Yeah,
we'll see if I ever even get a secondary SSD, but you don't need it.
Yeah. All right, we have the writer of Resident Evil 4, was it Shinji Mikami, said that he hopes if they remake Resident Evil 4, they update the story because he wrote it in 3 weeks.
That's just funny. And, good on him for saying that.
Yeah, and I think this is a thing you see people say all the time, like, don't change anything in the story. Can you believe they removed this cutscene? And it's like, I just found it refreshing that one of the writers was like, yeah, it'd probably be better if you updated it. Because I would certainly say that. Like, who am I to think that 10 years after I make something by myself, or actually however long ago it was, I think more than 10 years, obviously.
A lot more than 10 years at this point.
It'll be almost 20 years or something. That, why am I so sure no one could do a better job than me? It's not always bad to update things.
I think this weird idea people have where sometimes they think writing has gotten worse in certain games or gameplay gets worse. It's like I think some people are just have really, really, really strong nostalgia goggles.
Yeah, and this also reminded me of something I heard about for the HBO show The Plot Against America, where the original writer of it decades ago was talking to the showrunner, and they're like, we're actually thinking of changing this aspect of the story because we think it would make more sense. And the writer of that HBO show was surprised that the writer of the book goes, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. And he's like, what? He's like, I'm not infallible. Yeah, that's a better ending. Yeah, I wrote this 50 years ago, dude. Like, what? Yeah, by myself. Yeah, I'm not surprised your team of writers at HBO came up with a better aspect of one of the parts of the plot. And he was just blown away by that. He's like, all right, we'll do it. He's like, yeah, sounds good. And I think more writers need to sometimes people come up with better ideas if you give them enough time. But Anyways, moving forward, AMD receives approval for Xilinx acquisition. Oh, we always knew it was going through, but there you go, damn. And the Xbox Series X fridge is out.
Thank God.
I brought this up because I remember saying I wanted it, but when I clicked on the Target link to it, it's only $100. That's not too bad. It has pretty bad reliability.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to get one to put behind me in the studio for my videos, but I don't know. Not if it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's just it's kind of a joke device, so I guess we can't be surprised there. I wonder how fast they decide, like how fast of a product they decided this would be. Like, oh, people are calling it a fridge. Let's do this as a joke because we're fun and jokey.
All right, and final story in the write-up. FTC investigating Microsoft-Activision deal. We have a couple reader mails for this as well, but yeah, I just want to bring this up. You know, I've always said that this assumption that the Microsoft-Activision deal is going to go through easily is a wrong assumption. I think it will probably go through, but the idea that the FTC isn't going to try to block this after just blocking ARM is weird.
Yeah.
Why would they? They might block this, guys. And it is getting to a point where it is looking like a company is trying to become a monopoly. And it's funny, recent guest Richard Hogue was just saying apparently the other day that he gives it a 20% chance at this point this thing's blocked after seeing this going through. And that a big reason you see Microsoft walking around going, no, all of our games are going to be on PlayStation and we'll even bring them to Nintendo is because Microsoft's trying to telegraph to the FTC that they won't do monopolistic things.
I think there are some people that are acting like it was an inevitability that it was going to be challenged by or blocked by the FTC, and some people that were acting like, well, this clearly isn't a monopolistic practice. I mean, I think there's a debate for it being monopolistic. I understand that Sony is actually still technically a bigger publisher of video games than Microsoft, but Microsoft owning a vertical segment of like this many markets is probably not great. And yeah, I think the fact that they immediately were telegraphing that most things wouldn't become exclusive was signaling to the FTC to not try to block the deal.
Mm-hmm. And you know, Nvidia did similar things after they announced their ARM acquisition. They walked around saying, we're not going to change anything, we're not going to do anything. But at the end of the day, what the FTC's decided is it doesn't matter what you might say you're going to do. The fact is, if you do this acquisition, you could become a monopoly. And therefore, we're blocking it. It's going to be up to the FTC if they come to that same conclusion. But I do think anyone who's listening to this and going, oh, they said they're going to still put it on Nintendo. The FTC does not evaluate if they think you'll be nice. They evaluate if they think what you're doing is easily leading to a monopoly and you should be stopped. Amiable Chief writes in. He says, do you think Sony purchasing Bungie was a knee-jerk reaction to the Activision deal, or just unfortunate timing that made it seem so? If anything, it would be a reaction to the Bethesda deal based on the timeline of the purchase and the fact that they said they were working on this for half a year. But no, it's really its own thing.
Yeah, I think so. Unless Sony had caught wind in like months before and decided to try to pursue another large deal. I suppose. I'm not saying that's what happened. I suppose that could have happened. You're probably right. They're at least semi-independent of one another, and maybe there was a push to announce it faster after the Activision deal was announced. But I think that's probably at most what it was.
Yeah, it wasn't a reaction to it. Again, though, it's not to say there isn't some aspects to this that were reactionary to a certain degree. You know, Tick Dickler writes in and he goes, gentlemen, I hate consolidation as much as the next person, but you guys have to admit, Microsoft taking the biggest selling yearly PlayStation game and centrally partnered FPS game, Call of Duty, and making it a Microsoft first party game, only for Sony to take what was once the greatest Microsoft first-party studio, known for amazing FPS games, and make them a Sony first-party is an incredible clapback. Given that the consoles are now definitely lost leaders, is anybody getting a PS360 generation feeling? Is another desperate dialectical battle of Xbox and PlayStation, each testing and strengthening each other on the horizon? Or is that just wishful thinking? Oh, I think it's here. I think Sony is woken up, and the idea that they're going to just waddle around and be like, we're in charge is gone. I don't think they did. They didn't pull a PS3. PS5 launched well, was far less arrogant than the PS3, but the PS3 eclipsed new levels of arrogance we've never seen before. So, it would be hard to be as arrogant as they were back then.
Yeah, and I don't see that at all right now. I don't see the level of arrogance even that Microsoft had when they launched the Xbox One. I think Sony seems somewhat more arrogant than they used to be, but I don't think people are remembering just how on top of the world Sony felt after the PS2. And I don't know if they could really rise to that level until all of the executives that were there during that era are gone. And the corporate structure has forgotten how arrogant and how bad that was for them. They were.
Yeah. And I guess another thing I want to add on to this whole Microsoft buying stuff, Sony buying stuff discussion is, I was thinking of this today. At the end of the day, I don't like the consolidation, and that's going to be the long-term problem. Short-term, guys, I think it's becoming abundantly obvious. Nothing is going to change. They're going to keep putting Call of Duty on PlayStation. They will probably start putting some of the newer or newest Call of Duties on Game Pass. But that's it. Sony's not going to pull Destiny from Xbox.
Yeah, Bungie's seemingly going to remain a third party, or not third party, is seemingly going to continue acting as a third party. And, maybe they'll be using some of their talent to supplement teams from other PlayStation teams. That's what it seems like they're doing, at least short term. Who knows? Maybe Bungie does become an exclusive house studio 5 years down the line. I'm not going to pretend that will never happen. But at least for the time being, Bungie is going to remain a third party, the third party developer of Destiny.
Now, and the people who think that Microsoft is just going to remove Call of Duty from PlayStation, it's not going to happen.
That's been clarified so many times now, and I'm confused why the discussion continued. I don't think it's happening animore, but I was confused why the discussion was continuing to happen. There was a couple days where it's you never know. Although that would be a massive hit to Activision's bottom line, taking Sony away from it, but. 3 days after the purchase was announced, Phil Spencer said, no, we're not doing that. Yeah. And no one really talked about that. It was just I guess people are still going to debate whether this Call of Duty is going exclusive when Phil Spencer explicitly said, no, it's not.
Right. And what I would say is, at the end of the day, I don't think you're seeing Microsoft pull games from Sony. I don't think you're seeing Sony pull games from Microsoft. I think what you're seeing is fewer companies controlling more of the market, and I don't like that. I don't think it's going to make almost any difference short-term or even mid-term, but 10 years from now, I am worried we will be looking at a place where Sony and Microsoft dictate everything.
Well, and you have to keep in mind that it's not just Sony, it's also Sony, Microsoft, Tencent, Embracer Group is who I was thinking of.
And so you have, we're going to have 5 entities deciding everything, and I don't like that.
Yeah, and it's getting to the point where it's Ubisoft and EA are going to seem like the little guys at a certain point.
What's happening when Ubisoft and EA seem like the underdogs?
Yeah.
I don't know, Dan. Let's move on here to the final reader mails. Evil Steve Software Boxed writes in. He says, I've been thinking about buying a PS5 for a while, but now I'm generally baffled if it's worth it to wait for the PS5 Slim and or Pro. Given that Tom has been consistently teasing Sony wants to do a price increase, justified by performance increase, I wanted to ask what exactly will I be getting for my money by waiting? Will potential new features and increased performance be big enough to justify a price hike over a base PS5 digital? No. I don't think so. I think maybe actually, but I don't think if Sony launches a 6-nanometer PS5 Pro that's effectively an overclocked 40 CU PS5 with like, I don't know, 40% more bandwidth is going to make you go, yeah, I waited to get this for $600. Just if you want one now, get one now. You're not going to regret it.
Yeah, and I don't know if you'll disagree with me on this, but I think Sony has generally been pretty good about the new releases of consoles and handhelds they put out. They don't make previous purchasers feel like burned by buying their previous console. Like, I don't think anyone who bought a PS4 base felt burned by the PS4 Pro.
No, I think the only time that ever happened at all was like the PS3, and that was like a unique, or in 360, but it was a unique scenario for both.
Yeah, that's true. And at least the original PS3 had more features, even though the features were arguably useless.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to some more of these reader mails. Actually, I'm going to jump over here and try to read through more of the, try to keep on the same train of thought. Deep Dish Learning Pizza writes in, and he says, "Hi, Tom and Little D." Do you approve of that name, Dan?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't think I do either. I wanted to ask your thoughts about the idea of game exclusives, but on PC. You read that correctly. I personally believe that in the future we will see PC games released that only run on a certain manufacturer's hardware, or at the very least run deliberately gimped in performance and features. I don't think this is hard to envision. As console exclusives have been around for decades, we heard rumors of Nvidia paying developers not to implement FSR into their games, and even little splash screens in games like say things like Nvidia the way it's meant to be played. I know these examples are a far step from locking out game dependent on what GPU a PC gamer is using, but I personally just feel that within the next 10 years we will be saying things like, I wanted to buy the AMD 9000 series, but I really wanted to play GTA 8. Anyways, feel free to tell me I'm wrong. Love the shows. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Deep Dish Learning Pizza, for writing in, and I will feel free to say you're wrong. I don't think that's happening, but I don't think what your example is happening. GTA 8. First of all, GTA 8 is probably coming out in 100 years. Second of all, I don't think a game of that caliber would ever do that. But let us remember, there's already Quake RTX. There's already Minecraft RTX. I think that's about the degree that you're going to get to. Or, of course, Dying Light 2, which might as well be an Nvidia exclusive in my book.
Yeah, and I think the idea of GIMP performance, depending on what manufacturer you buy from, like that's happened in the past many times. That's going to continue to happen, I think. The idea of a fully exclusive thing, though, seems like a thing no developer would sign on to unless they started paying, massive sums of money to keep it locked out from AMD or Nvidia. And if that became a big thing, that would be one of those things where it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to keep playing PC games then.
And this has happened before. You had, what is it, with Glide or whatever? I don't remember which. There's been games that have been exclusive to one graphics manufacturer in the past. Half-Life Lost Coast, you needed an AMD CPU to boot it up for a bit. Not the actual game. They would not ever make a Half-Life game only on AMD or Intel. And I think if you look around, Sony's bringing more games to PC. Microsoft's putting a lot of their games on PlayStation, bringing them to Nintendo. I think that business model's gone where that even makes sense anymore. I think you're just going to see little things here and there. Dying Light 2, Quake RTX, Minecraft RTX. They're the closest thing you're going to get. But a few indie games, yes, only run on NVIDIA or something like that. I don't think you're seeing GTA 8, which, again, is not coming out in 10 years. I don't see that ever. Something of that caliber. If we're
looking at the cadence, GTA 7 will... Realistic prediction, GTA 7 might be a 2038 game.
Right, competing with the Elder Scrolls 6.
Competing with the Elder Scrolls 5 PS7 edition.
Yeah, the re-release of Elder Scrolls 5.
They still haven't released a new Elder Scrolls. They're just continuing to release Skyrim in different forms.
I'm just kidding, guys. Elder Scrolls 6 isn't coming out in 2038. It'll probably come out 2032. All right, enough Bethesda slams. Wasted Herald writes in, would the 6500 XT been better reviewed if people actually considering buying it commented on it? I joke, but I do really wonder what percentage of the people making fun of this card are people with stronger cards anyways versus the people actually considering buying the thing. Kind of like people complaining the 3090 is too expensive, but let's be honest, you're not the person who's ever going to buy one. Why do you care so much? I think that's honestly a very fair thing to point out from both aspects.
Yeah, like the. I think a lot of the negative coverage was people just piling onto it for who weren't necessarily going to buy it. Yeah.
I mean, you see behind me, Dan, I'm a reviewer. I've got a bunch of cards behind me. I've got a 3070 Founders in my system. I'm not the person who would actually get a 6500 XT that I needed. Mm-hmm. The people that want it, though, man, are they in my comments saying, thank God I could get this instead of a 1050 Ti.
Yeah.
And the same goes for some high-end cards because, you know, I've told myself recently, you know what? If top RDNA 3 is over twice as strong as RDNA 2 in raster, and then it's like triple the ray tracing performance, I'll pay big bucks for it. And then if someone calls me stupid for paying, you know, whatever, $1,500, $2,000 for it, I'd go, yeah, but it's not for you. It's for me to do rendering. And I want to reward this company for taking the crown by such an absurd amount finally. But this isn't for you.
Yeah.
So why are you commenting? Calm down. Easy on the cap locks, guys. Dan. All right, final reader mail. QH Freddy writes in, let's say you worked at a GPU company and were given a mandate to fix the GPU pricing singularity you've been talking about and offer a new card at the $100 price point. How do you go about it? I couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, so a $100 card, I assume people want everything to at least be somewhat of a 1080p card, so I think you want to have 4 gigs of RAM.
No, that's the first thing I put here, right? As number one, I guess it has to have 2 gigabytes of RAM. It's like, do you guys think...
Which is 2 gigabytes of RAM, I think it's already a non-starter then, as a gaming card.
The MX series would disagree with you, but I would disagree with the MX series. Exactly. You know, like, people talk about how many corners the 6500 XT cut, and it was too many. What corners do you think I would have to cut for a $100 card?
Yeah, I know. Like, it would have to have 2 gigabytes because if it had 4 gigabytes, I mean, a $100 card, 4 gigabytes is already, like, what, 40% of the price, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, look, guys, the damage is done. Prices have been going up for a while. Inflation is the nail in the coffin on that. Now, is there something we could do to try to help the pricing singularity, as I've called it, outside of a $100 GPU? Like, could we do a $200, $300 one? I mean, off the top of my head, it's like, yeah, what if they made a monolithic RDNA 3 card on the latest Global Foundries 12 nanometer with 8 gigabytes of RAM, all the modern features you need with decent ray tracing to last you a while, and you aim for a 250-watt card that could be sold for, well, at this point, I kind of feel like it's going to be $300, though. You know, even in a good time. And at that point, I'm starting to doubt if I couldn't make a better 5 nanometer card that uses half the energy because the die's half as big and we need less power components, a cheaper PCB, cheaper fan. I think there could be something done at the $300 mark, but I just don't see how I could make anything at the $100. And ultimately, I think an APU is the real answer.
Yeah.
Not to mention all of this e-waste. Why am I making a new... Let's be honest. So what? This $300 12 nanometer card. How strong is it going to be? Like what? What are we talking about at best? A 2080 or like a 6600 XT or something? That's already right now just below 400. And like, so what? It's a double the power usage 6600 XT. I don't see the point of that when you can just get a used card. I really think that you're just kind of contributing to e-waste at that point, and I actually start to see Gamers Nexus point where he keeps bringing that up. The solution is making a good APU for $200.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
And I think the market does kind of have to move there at some point.
Indubitably. All right, well, that is all of the reader mails. That is all of the stories. I don't know, Dan, any last words?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, as always, we thank you guys for listening. Remember, you know, this independent thought, this putting out leaks about AMD's practices, Nvidia's practices, is not profitable without Patreon. So if you have the extra money and, you know, $2 a month, $4 a month, you can join the Patreon. You get access to exclusive podcasts, ad-free podcasts. You get them early. You can ask me and guest questions. You can have your questions read on air like they were in this episode. You can... I mean, you can make it so maybe I finish an episode before I start rambling and forget my train of thought, even though that train of thought was so easy, like what I'm doing right now. But yeah, we can't do this without our patrons. Please consider supporting us. And otherwise, tell your friends about us, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast, give us a review on iTunes. And as always, thank you for listening. I'm going to go collapse.
Bye, everyone.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law is Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it, and so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels: Brad Medlin, Anthony Greffa, GUK, Benny Berlin, Justin Yant, Thomas Rupp, I Love You, Lynn and Jim, Ivan K, Tom Bailey, Muhammad Al-Kawari, Frederick Lau, Lynn Yee, Justin Parrish, Zachary Martin, Terrence Herod, Drita Full, Phil S, D31337 Antics, Jackson A. Miller, Jesse Daskowiak, Josh Law, JBG, Travis Gooding, The Mechanical Philosopher, Lebo King Kilo, Fatboy Deesru, Daniel Hyde, A Guy in PA 81, Nathan Mose, Cole Addict, Matt Salem, Aaron Close, F7GOS, Matthew Landavazo, My Name is Nobody, Judson N. Alethros, Jensen Wang, Hey There's a Kitty, Greg Tiwantik, Rentaro Matsuka, John Jamison, Sam Bensel, Matthew Lane, Mark Rademacher, Jan Rauner, Chris Licata, Michael McGee, Meyer Techrants, Eric Jackson, Jonathan, Patrick Groh, 3DS Boy 08, Dominique Cox, Stefan, Original Ross, Sandy, Garrido, Saunderson, Joaquin Hagen, Teak Autumn, Sol Connor, Michael Costa, Andrew S. C. Chitz, Aaron Keith, Gregory S. Hacker, Hexapumas, Tom San Filippo, Justice Brennan, Zutsu Taylor, Trevor Powers, Stu, Elenia, Nanya, Daniel Nishbal, Franco Frederic, Dan Galanowski, Ian Clifford, Axel Cisneros, Leighton Perry, Joseph Kierman, Brett Summers, Blake, Donovan Russo, Noah Nicoella, Zlicky, Martin Porshegi, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Hulan, Patrick J.S., Justin Staples, Freddie Canos Jr., Stephen Coates, Kiwi Phil, Brucha, Jeremy So, Mitchell Pell, Silvanos, Eddie Del Castillo, Jacob Laster, Luis Correa, Deke, Otiv Ikurtz, Tyler Lindley, Tim Robbins, Jake Dude 23, Brian Regelman, Justin Gower, Caillou Markelli, Dave McCoy, Valco Malev, Gabe Wagner, Ronnie, DNA Tech, Michael Deaton, MJB1, Maurice Courtois, Wesley Sager, Sarcastro, Mai Sharono, Y Trui, Roman, William W. Draper, Ararat, Spam G. Spamton, Henry Zhang, Stephen Hart, Christopher A. Butler, Greg, Peter Moore, Amy Will Chief, Justin Thomas, Sam Miller, Semi Malas, James Anderson, Shakir, Nick Rakin, Holden Mobley, Matthew Lazier, R. Pete Sharma, Meat and Pork, Jimmy N.G., Mads, Matthew Lazier, Benjamin Oshley, Mark Mitchell, Shield TV, Couteau, Aaron, John Wazink, Mohammed, Jean Debont, Post Media, Sean Ashmont, Daniel Dewar, Stephen Jang, JSMMH, Georgie Kostadinov, PC Beast 22, Reginald Aria, Narathiel, Ivan, Charles Russell, Halbuma, Akarsh, Aditya, The Grid, Andrew S., Chris Rich, Powell Zagardtowski, Desist, Josh Law, Crispy Erbakken, Chrysantine, Zavbeat03, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.